Hello, welcome to Script Club. My name is Luke Foster and I get together with screenwriters from around the world for deep dive discussions of produced screenplays. Script Club is brought to you by Centerframe, which is a club for filmmakers where you can build your network, develop your skills, meet mentors and get your projects made. You can find out more about Centerframe and about how you can use the platform to submit to film festivals and apply for the British Short Film Awards by going to centerframe.club. But today I'm delighted to be here at the Bath Film Festival to talk about the screenplay for Trainspotting, and I'm absolutely thrilled that the writer of the script, the acclaimed screenwriter and Olivier Award winning playwright, John Hodge, is with us, as well as being nominated for an Academy Award for his Trainspotting script and winning a BAFTA. John's other credits include Shallow Grave, A Lifeless Ordinary, The Beach, and T2, the Trainspotting sequel. So please give a big welcome to John. Thank you so much for coming. I'm also thrilled that we are joined by one of our previous Script Club guests, Sean Daniels, who was wearing a cooking apron the last time he was with us, coming from his kitchen to talk about The Bear, but I'm delighted he's with us again today. Sean is an Academy Nicholl Fellowship winner. He's also a SAFTA-winning screenwriter for film and TV. And he is the creative and professional program leader at UWE. So please give a big welcome to Sean. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And just a forewarning, if you hear a baby crying, it's not a sound effect from the film, it's my little girl in the back row.
And thank you so much. It's really so nice to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for coming. Script Club is always designed to be more of a discussion than just an interview or a Q&A. So rather than having like a big Q&A section at the end, we're going to discuss 3 scenes from the film. And then after each scene, I'm going to open it up and see if anyone would like to say anything about that scene and also ask John any questions about it. But before we look at our first scene, I wanted to ask you, John, I mean, firstly, how did you come to adapt Irvine Welsh's novel? And also, you know, what were the challenges of adapting a novel that really mostly consists of very loosely related events that are all kind of told from multiple people's perspectives?
Good morning. Thank you all very much for coming. I'm amazed to see so many people here. Well, I shouldn't say that. Jasmine organising the festival so wonderfully, but there's so many other attractions about. But thank you for coming. I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have. So the question was, how did I come to be adapting Trainspotting, Irvine Welsh's book in the first place? Well, I've been very lucky. I've made a film called Shallow Grave, which was a sort of thriller, I suppose. I made it with a producer called Andrew MacDonald and a director, Danny Boyle, and we decided to try and stick together and make another film. And Andrew just turned up one day and said, I've someone given me this book, Trainspotting. It's written by this guy in Edinburgh, Irvine Welsh, and it's sort of stories of a bunch of young people who are involved in all sorts of things, including taking drugs and so on. And yeah, I read the book. I thought it was great. I mean, it's really a powerful voice that Irvine has and had, and it was particularly shocking, you know, having not encountered him before. Yeah, I mean, he's so well established now, but it was really surprising at the time. He was giving a voice to people who didn't normally have a voice to people who are normally portrayed with pity or contempt. But he was giving them a full range of human characteristics, including a sense of humor. And it was really sort of moving. But I didn't think it would really make a very good film, obviously, because, as you say, Luke, it's a series of vignettes, really, in different voices. But all the other guys were very keen, so we said we'd have a go. So we spent a week. We spent a week just sort of talking about the book, meeting up every day and going through it and seeing what they thought. You know, people, Andrew and Danny and myself, just highlighting bits we enjoyed that we thought would be useful. And then they said, well, that's fine, off you go. And I went away And I'll come back to this theme, but I was really lucky. I had not a clue what I was doing, and I think that's really important and useful. And I know it's contrary to the ethos of education, but it's wonderful when you're not. It took me a couple of decades to realize this afterwards, but it's really wonderful when you're not restricted by what you think is expected of you, particularly with a piece of material like Trainspotting, which was such a mess in a wonderful way. It really quite liberating to just think, oh, what do I think here? What do I think there? And of course, I still had some feeling of duty towards shaping it towards some sort of narrative, and we definitely did that. And Irvin does that to a certain extent. He plays lip service to that towards the end of his book. So I felt some obligation towards that. But just in general, I was thinking, what do I like here? What do I want to see? What do I want to see? Who do I want to be with? What do I want to see next? What's happening with these people? Where just all the kind of human questions that you would ask. And then just sort of set myself the challenge of trying to sort of stitch it together in a way that made it feel a little bit more coherent. I mean, we can discuss individual scenes and how that translated into that. But yeah, I say I'll come back to it. I think there's it's great when you don't know anything.
As an educator, I can actually agree.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Encourage students to run on their instincts, sort of with a background of structure and things to help them when they need to fall back on something. But yeah, that idea of not knowing what you're doing is really great for creativity and excitement. Yeah, no, I'd also I should add, we were very lucky that we'd made this first film, Shallow Grave, with Film 4, Channel 4, and it had been successful, so we were in their good books, and the guy in charge at that time was a wonderful man called David Hawken, and he met us after and he said, I hear you want to adapt this book that involves junkies sticking needles in their penises. And we said, well, it's more to it than that, David, but yeah, basically, yeah. And he said, well, I think that sounds great. Well, off you go. And we had really no editorial interference, so that, it's that in itself is quite liberating. We're not thinking, what's X going to think or Y going to think? We knew that we had people, supporting us.
Great, thank you. So I think we should discuss probably one of the most infamous scenes in the film, and this is from quite early on. This is when Mark Renton is trying to give up heroin, but he needs one more hit to kind of get him through the night, and the only thing he's able to get his hands on are these 2 opium suppositories, and then he gets caught short trying to get back to his flat and has to run into this quite revolting toilet in a bookie. Oh, I love that he literally just said, this is the most horrible toilet in Britain. But I remember, I watched this at the cinema when it first came out, and I remember just being so taken by surprise when Renton just suddenly completely disappears into the toilet, because it's just so unexpected, because everything up until that point had been very grounded, very gritty. It's about heroin addicts, so you're expecting it to be social realist. So I'm very curious, John, as to, how did that decision come about to kind of go off into kind of more magical fantasy territory? Obviously, he goes into the toilet, and then you sort of see him swimming towards the opium suppositories. How did that sort of decision come about? And were you concerned at all that there might be a little bit too much of a shift in tone at that point?
I'll answer the first question, the last part of the question first. Again, I didn't know what I was doing, so I wasn't bothered about shift in tone. I didn't really worry about that. But first of all, I'd just like to pay tribute there to the musical choice, which I think came, I'm not sure, partly from Danny, but also our editor, who was wonderful, guy called Masahiro Hirakabu, who helped contribute. He's really into film music and contributes a lot to the musical choices and musical management during the event. I think that piece of music really works so well there. So when I remember, it was a great scene in Irvin's book, and you read it, and it's kind of horrible to think about. So I remember the question for me was, well, how do we put something on the screen that matches your imagination? Because in Irvin's book, you read this guy sticking his hand down the toilet to retrieve the suppositories. It's horrible. But your imagination is doing the work. That's how kind of novels really work best. So how do we do that on screen? And I remember thinking that, like, just him going into the toilet and putting his arm down, it's just that, then that's all you've got. You know, you haven't got anything else. So what is the feeling you get with that? What is the feeling? And the feeling is one of immersion, you know, in the waste, in the sewage, in the horrors of it all. So I just thought, well, that's where he goes. He goes into that space, and literally he goes. So that was my line of thought. And I was also inspired. I say inspired. You can say I ripped off or plagiarized or hopelessly copied a scene in a 1980s teen horror flick called Nightmare on Elm Street, which was the first of what became a franchise you'd call it, or a series of films. If anyone's ever seen the original, it is very good. I mean, it's a 1980s kind of teen horror exploitation, so all that. But it's got a scene in it where the young heroine mustn't fall asleep, or Nightmare Freddy Krueger will come and kill her. And she's been staying awake, and she has a bath, and the hot bath, she's falling asleep. And she gets dragged under the water of the bath. And we didn't have YouTube in those days, so I could never rewatch the scene, but I'd seen it 10 years earlier. It made a big impression on me. And it's very short. It's worth looking at. It's good. So he dragged her under the bath, and then for a moment, you get a shot from, like, supposedly in the depths of this bath, like 5 meters deep, and you're looking up towards the light. I always remember thinking, it was like, it's just a moment in the film. It's sort of, I thought, well, that's great, isn't it? You got a sort of domestic thing, which is just like, everyone's seen a bath, and it's like there's a whole world under there. And so that was in my thoughts as well, the idea that there might be a whole unknown world, a subaquatic world in there. And so these sort of strands of thought came together. And it's also, and again, I'll repeat this with some of the other things you can say, so for me, it's a way to conclude the scene, rather than him just retrieving them and walking out. You build to something. So that was my line of thought.
What did you find interesting about this scene, Sean? And do you have any questions about it for John?
I mean, the thing, I remember when I watched it for the first time, so I was way too young to watch this. I was 13. And, you know, parents, maybe it's good parenting, maybe not. But I remember watching this and thinking, for the first time, I sort of understood Renton. Like, I was too young to understand drugs, too young to understand that culture. But seeing that desperation of digging in the toilet first, and then seeing like, oh, for him, this isn't an unpleasant experience because of what he's getting. That right there made me understand him, you know, completely. You know, so even at a young age, I got it. And that was, I think, really helpful for me for the rest of the film. In terms of the writing, I think, and I'll say this again and again, I think one of the things that amazes me now reading it again is just how much trust there is for you on the page, you know, in terms of like the most disgusting toilet in Britain. And then each beat is sort of very simple and not over-directed. So I guess like my small question is that, like, was it because of working with Danny, or how much sort of input did you know would come visually as you were writing?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Interesting. Just one other thing. You mentioned about social realism. Normally, that was certainly something we wanted to get away from. Social realism, when it's dealing with drugs, you tend to be making films for people who already agree with you. You know, just like the films that when I was growing up, there was one called Christiane F. about a young German heroin addict, which was reviewed, but no one go and see it because it's miserable. People just go and see it to disapprove of her lifestyle. But you want to engage with an audience that enjoys going to the cinema. You got to put on something that's entertaining and that shows two sides of life.
Can I add into that? Because I mean, you definitely succeeded. You know, like in the sense of, again, at that age, watching it for the first time, I really liked the film, and I got. The message about that. That's what one hopes people find it rewarding going to cinema. But yeah, you're just about direction or what, right? Yeah, I think I would say that's pretty wordy. That's my view. I think my view of the script personally, I just think it should be pretty minimal in terms of what you might call stage direction or scene setting. And that's partly because I feel no one likes to be told their job. You know, and you're working with a lot of talented people, designers, director, actors. And I kind of like, puts my heckles up, I don't like seeing a script where someone's written,
Dave draws on a cigarette calmly. Just like, it makes me sick. He inhales, he blows out, he says, "Let's do it." Oh, fuck it. Honestly, it should be there. To me, it should be there, evident from what's happening and what they say. And actors are so brilliant. They'll work it all out. They'll do it better than you can ever think. That's my opinion. So I don't like to describe too much. And also, the set, for me, just like exterior park day on a bench. That's it. I don't need to know about the birds or the leaves and the trees, unless they're pivotal to the plot. That's my feeling.
I mean, I'm going to say this again, especially at the end, but rereading this, I mean, I know I try as hard as possible to get down to the level that you've achieved in terms of word count. I still struggle, but it's wonderful to see that again and be reminded how little you need to put on the page.
And also, I think when people are reading a script, they probably just go past that stuff. I think your eyes are drawn to the dialogue, and if there's obviously sometimes you've got to describe something quite intricate, or the scene where there's no dialogue, whatever. But I think let everyone do their job. That's my feeling.
But I suppose also, just like in these scenes, it makes every word all the more important, and every image that you are choosing to put on the page all the more important. And so even with the minimalism here, it's so punchy.
Yeah, well, kind of, you're implying, I think, one is implying, the script is implying a different shot, isn't it? It's kind of implying a different setup with each paragraph. Yeah. I think, but without kind of saying, this is the setup, it's that's what I hope.
So does anyone have any questions about this particular scene or any at its early stage you would like to ask? Yes, over there.
I noticed, I'm actually not sure if it made it into the film, because I can't remember. I don't remember, well, I remember not remembering it. There was a montage in the script. So it was like...
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Did you make it into the film?
No, I didn't. No, I think I was being frivolous. I wrote a montage of kind of things that might symbolically represent the act of emptying his bowels. It was like B-52 bombers, and the elephant on Blue Peter and stuff like that. That's a long time. Yeah. No, that didn't make it in.
And you didn't mind it? Or you weren't disappointed?
I was probably furious, but I got over it. I don't even remember it, do I?
I think there's another question here.
Have you always had this writing style, or do you think you developed it as have more experience?
So the question was, has he always had this writing style, or did he develop it with more experience?
I think I've sort of, in my own mind, codified it a bit more. I think it sort of came naturally, but now I've thought about it, or the experience of writing quite a lot of scripts, I found I prefer it. I'm not saying it's the right way. It's just personal taste, and I'm lazy.
Yes, one more question here.
Also, kind of talking about the directions and stuff that you put in on the visual ideas you had, I was wondering how much visual input do you actually sort of have in the scene? Like, do you kind of just come up with it and the director approves, or does it kind of collaborate? I
don't spend time on set. I don't know about, some other writers do, writers with more star power. I think if you're working with, who's the guy who wrote West Wing and what's his name and all that?
Oh, Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, I think you're with Aaron Sorkin. He's on your shoulder if you're the director. And there are others. But
I like the tone in which you say that.
Again, it's about trusting people to do their job. And I was lucky, I made my first film with Danny, who was great. And sometimes I remember thinking, I wouldn't do that. But actually, then I sort of thought, and I've reflected more on it since, is you have to trust people. You have to really appreciate what they can offer and what they do. And it, as everyone says, it's a collaborative business. And so I don't get involved. I quite like just writing scripts and imagining, and then if it turns out different, I think if a scriptwriter wants, and that's perfectly reasonable, if a scriptwriter wants to have more input into that, they should become a director, and lots of them do. I mean, that's fine. They can put themselves forward, but not me.
So I wanted to discuss now another of the very iconic scenes from the film, and this is just from a little bit later. So this is after Mark Renton has been arrested for shoplifting, and a judge doesn't send him to prison, but only on the grounds that he completes a rehabilitation program. And he's had some sort of celebratory drinks for that, but then he slips away and goes and scores another hit.
Was Sir care for a starter? Some garlic bread, perhaps?
No, thank you. I'll proceed directly to the intravenous injection.
I love the dialogue, the exchange here between Swanee and Renton. It's just so playful and delightful. And I love the way they're all talking in metaphors, and then so you think that the taxi is a metaphor for the ambulance, but no, it's actually an actual taxi. I think that's great. And also then I just love how once he starts kind of get taken into hospital, one scene just slides beautifully into the next. There's a beautiful fluidity in these script pages, I think. I think if you're ever looking at how to get one scene to kind of just glide effortlessly into the next scene, it's a really good example of this, because you're almost being like carried along with Renton as he's taken from Swanee into the taxi and then to the ambulance. But what I'd like to ask you, John, is it's really sort of going back, I think, a little bit to what you were saying before about wanting to avoid social realism, because I think this event is in the book. It's mentioned, but it's only in like one paragraph where Renton just says that he went to Swanee's for another hit after the party and overdosed and woke up in hospital. And I think if you gave that source material to probably 10 screenwriters, I think probably 9 out of 10 would come back with something quite bleak and depressing and do the very sort of the social realist bleak version of that overdose scene. Whereas, this is some of this dialogue here, it's almost quite playful, and the tone is a little bit more lighter. So was that something you were very much keen to avoid and just wanted to keep the tone on the lighter side even during scenes such as this?
Yeah, I certainly felt the character should be allowed to be articulate and allowed to have wit, rather than, as I say, in the traditional portrayal of the people with pity or contempt. But in that, two great actors, as Peter Mullen and Ewan McGregor, are both absolutely fantastic. Both of them, wow, top of the game. And Lou Reed. I mean, what can you put that perfect day on any scene, but wow, amazing. But interesting. I saw at the top of the scene on the script there. I remember the scene before, after he's acquitted the court, and they go to the pub, and then he goes out the back of the pub and he climbs onto a wall and he does a flip, a forward flip, and then he lands in that scene. And again, so there's something that's not realistic, but I was looking for a way to get from one scene to the other without kind of shoe leather, as they say, and in a way that was, I don't know, somehow in keeping with the tone that we'd established. And we did that. And Ewan was so sort of up for anything in those days. He wasn't a stunt. He just did this flip off a tall wall. This is great. She wouldn't do, and then you can see him. He's like, his performance there, he was sort of up for anything. And again, it's the same as with the toilet. It's like, okay, you read there's an overdose. So you're thinking, well, how might that feel? And you read descriptions of it and so on. How can we communicate that visually and with no holds barred? What does it feel like? And so that sinking of the red kind of surround just felt right. I remember being not sure if people would like that, but Danny responded to it very positively and said, oh no, he wanted to do that. And we were working with making the film with this group of guys, men and women, from a thing called Carlton Athletic Football Club, which was a drug recovery group, and they formed a football club. And they were wonderful people, and we couldn't have made the film without them. They were really helpful. A few of them who had been through similar unpleasant personal experiences to this, they felt that was a very realistic depiction of how they felt, which was nice. I mean, we couldn't have counted on that, but that was great. So it was, just giving the characters a life rather than, oh no, here's some horrible people overdosing,
So two things from my side. One, first question is, because obviously so much of this is invented, as Luke says, like it's barely a paragraph in the book. At what point did you kind of feel like this was now your version of Trainspotting, your story, and that you had the permission in a way to kind of invent so much? That would be my first question. I'll stop there and then I'll ask the second one after that.
Yeah, I haven't read the script since it was made, so just refreshing. Did I really write these words? I don't know. Someone did. Yeah, so Irvin was very nice. We met him before we started, well, I think when we were getting the rights, and it was quite sort of cagey, I suppose, because he's written this book, and he letting people make a film of it, but just met him, we started chatting, and at the end of it, he was just so generous. He just said, well, I look forward to seeing it. And then Danny, of course, had the masterstroke of inviting Irvine Welsh to be in the film, which, Irvine his vanity must have been tickled. It didn't turn out to be the greatest actor.
No, you can.
but certainly a distinctive presence and a wonderful, and from our point of view, a wonderful presence to have in the film. But throughout, I think he was at peace with the idea that there's his book and there's the film. And I think if we had somehow undermined the ethos or something, he would have taken against it. But I hope we didn't, or he certainly felt we didn't. He's also, a pragmatic author, and he's publicizing his book and so on. And I think there's no doubt that the book is grimmer than the film.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the film is entertaining, but it's like we're talking about sort of grim social realism. If we'd made something that was as grim as the book, people wouldn't have enjoyed it. And I think that's we always wanted people to go to cinema and enjoy the film, and plays were made. There were stage adaptations of his book as well, which again were grimmer than our film. But theatre can do that. Theatre, there's on it as fairly small theatre. They're not spending. The budget for this was, I think, £1.25 million, but that was still a lot of money. But a stage play doesn't cost that much to put on, and so you have a responsibility to give people something for their money.
Well, that allows me to segue quite neatly into my next question, which is, I love Shallow Grave as well. Absolutely wonderful film. And but when you look at Shallow Grave, it sort of does. You can see the stage roots of your writing in it. And Trainspotting for me feels more cinematic even on the page. And I think the thing for me that makes it more cinematic is your transitions, how you are like the flip, but all through the script, the way you're transitioning from scene to scene. And hello, darling. And I think I remember when working with directors, I remember the idea that they love transitions and they hold on to those. Was that something, again, that was unconscious for you, or were you quite aware of that when you were writing?
Well, it was conscious in the sense of the one I was talking about, where he does the flip. But it wasn't what I was looking for there and here, and also with the first scene we watched in a way was, okay, you've built a scene. Here's a situation. He's lost his suppositories or he's overdosed. How do you kind of get out of it? How do you bring it to a conclusion with him going down the toilet, or with this visual representation of the overdose? They come about partly as a sort of philosophical response, but also partly a practical one of how am I going to end the scene? What am I going to do next? So I think it must be the same for all writers, that there are two things going at once. One is practical, and the other is kind of spiritual or philosophical.
It's always really hard to know where to end a scene.
Yeah,
and get to the next one. Yeah.
It is, and it's a question that I find can obsess over and think about. I was watching Raging Bull was on iPlayer at the moment, and I thought, just watch a bit of it. I was really astonished actually by the way it's a kind of masterpiece, and the editing and the way he does it are very hard. They're very he makes no compromise. He just scene ends and then goes to something different. You just have to catch up, which is a different approach. Yeah. I think what we have here is a kind of almost as you said, kind of fluidity, joining them together. And I like that. But you can do it the other way, and I think Scorsese in that film does it. It's brilliant. I wrote a stage play called Collaborators about the relationship between Stalin and Bulgakov, and I decided I didn't really like the idea of scene ends, next scene. So I just did it as basically one continuous scene, so the set never changes, and it just asked the audience to accept that the location has changed by depending on who's on stage. And I don't know, it worked quite well. I really liked that thing. It just, to me, I didn't like the interruptions, and it's sort of same here. I just wanted it to go.
Well, all I can say is, when I was learning to write, and more accurately at that age, learning to even like the idea of writing, the way you transition from scene to scene was hugely influential. And I keep remembering Trainspotting every time I kind of think of match cuts and moving from one scene to the next.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just adding to that. I mean, this screenplay is available online, and I really would encourage people to read it. As I was just talking about there, it's got just fantastic examples of just how to effortlessly go really sort of from one scene to the next. But I wanted to ask if anyone, in the audience has any questions that you would like to ask John.
How interactive was the writing process with Danny Boyle while you were developing the script?
So the question was, how interactive was the writing process with Danny? I mean, as I said, we had that week before I started work when we sort of went through the book, sort of chapter by chapter, saying what we liked or didn't like. And then after the first draft, Danny gave me his comments. I did more work, and then and then he read it again and more work, and things like I remember him saying, one of his comments was, "Oh, I think we should have some football in the script." Because it seems to be such a part of their lives, and find a scene for football. And that was how I ended up. I thought, what can I do with that? How can I, that's the kind of comment that can be quite useful. It's not a specific, I want you to do this or that. It's like a general wish or a general comment. And so then it can be quite inspirational. I thought, how can we get this in? And I thought back to my own relationship with football, and also thinking about the fact that a lot of the references were to Hibs, which was too parochial for a wider audience, and I was thinking, so that's how it came, with the Archie Gemmell goal, which was a sort of a very important moment for Scottish people of my age, and so that's how that whole thing ended up, and it dovetailed with a bit in Irvin's book where he's having sex and he thinks of himself as a goal scorer. It's terrible. But so but it was sort of a comment from Danny about we need some football, sort of led me to that. So it's just an exchange, a dialogue between myself and director and producer, just feedback and comments, and equally there'd be bits they didn't like, which I can't remember now, that they cut out, or they didn't cut out, but they said to me they don't like. Andrew MacDonald, the producer I work with, he's fantastic. He just. You'll hold the script and say, I liked it to here, and then you'll sort of pinch the middle pages and say, but I got a bit bored here, which is actually really helpful. I find that really helpful compared to when you work with the studios, if you ever happen to do that. There are people there who are paid to write notes, so you get 20 pages of notes on your script, which is kind of useless. So that's a good relationship, I think, with Danny. So it's nice.
What were you saying there about Andrew MacDonald? It reminded me a bit. We had Barry Sonnenfeld on Script Club, and he said he just writes DB in the margins of scripts, which just means do better. But I think there was a question here as well.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, I had a director who did the same thing with my script. It's like, here's an idea, but better.
I think there's a question down here, actually, this lady here.
All right.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because you kind of mentioned when you talk about the scene, that adapting it from the book, it's kind of like connecting the events, and some of the stuff you included in the film of nothing more than paragraphs.
Yeah.
Books. I was just wondering, when adapting the book, how do you then decide what you're going to include, what you're going to expand on, and what you're going to abuse?
Yeah. So how do we choose from the book what to include and what not to include? I mean, it's the book's quite sort of rambling, lots of different characters, and so I suppose your first is what's your emotional response to various bits? What moves you in a good way, or what do you really like? And then you look at it and you think, I've got too many characters. So it's a practical process really. At that point, it's thinking, right, what can I give to this character, so I amalgamate them, so I only end up with 5 or 6 characters rather than 10 or 12. And which voice is the dominant voice? And there are various voices in Irvin's book, but the dominant one did seem to be Renton. So that's a decision. That he's not Irvin, but you read it and you think, this must be the author talking. But it's not really, but if you feel that way. So it's an authorial voice. So you're looking through the book for what can I give to Renton? What's kind of how do we construct his story? That's a sort of practical thing, It's just a question of going through it again and again, I think, several times until you you come up with something that feels right for you. I remember, reading how Martin Scorsese again and Nicholas Pileggi, the writer you worked with, approached Goodfellas, which they took the book, they both went away and came back with separate lists of the incidents they wanted to include. So, I think it's the same idea. You just, what's your response to it? What lights the fire for you? What do you want to see on screen? So. And you're right, some of them are tiny little paragraphs, but they inspire you, so that's all you need.
So I think we should just look at one final scene now. So this is actually just from the very, very end of the film. So Renton and his friends have done a drug deal in London, which has netted them £16,000. But then the following morning, Renton wakes up earlier than everybody else. But Sean, I think you were quite keen to talk about this scene.
Oh yeah, this was very much one of the scenes I wanted to discuss. So for me, part of it was because in the book, it's such a different experience of who Renton is. I remember I watched the film first and then read the book. And I remember liking Renton in the film. And at this moment, finding that, I understood why he was doing it and saw it as a good thing. And in the book, to put it simply, he's just a dick. And it's not as much of a triumphant moment as it is in the film. So tonally, it's vastly different, and who Renton is such a big difference. So part of my question is, sort of at what point did you shift who Renton is in the adaptation process? And then there's one tiny detail that really I love as different between the script and the film, is in the script it says they say nothing to each other, Spud and Renton, but Spud just has that little shake of the head, and that little difference I find fascinating because it changes so much in that moment. So I was wondering again if that was something that was more on set, and if so, were you surprised when you saw it?
Yeah, in the book, Renton, you're right, he's a bit meaner.
Yeah.
And he doesn't leave any money for anyone, for Spud. Although there's a line in it, he says the one person he felt bad about was Spud, isn't there?
Yeah. And sort of sick boy-ish, but only a tiny bit.
Yeah. I think it kind of evolved during development and then during filming. I think we weren't really sure what way it was going to go at the end. And obviously, I was just thinking the script slightly differs because he doesn't give them the money in the scene, does he? He leaves it for him.
Yeah.
So it may be, I can't remember, it's possible that we had the scene and then decided that he would leave him the money. And that may have been a response to Ewan's performance, which is likable. Yeah. He's a charismatic actor. And maybe the script does him more favors than the character does the character in the book, so maybe he's just more likable. And it felt like almost out of character for him not to in some way leave something for Spud. So I think perhaps, I can't remember the process, but I think I feel it's something like that, because I certainly think, at that point we probably weren't sure whether he was going to leave him anything or not. I wasn't sure about it myself, really. I remember having mixed feelings about whether Renton should be leaving money for Spud. But looking back, and as I say, embracing that character played by you, and I sort of feel that was true to the character and true to the version that we made. So that's my feeling about it overall. Endings are difficult. I think it can be, and then everyone's got a view, so you have to try and sort of steer your way through it and just find what works.
Okay. And just going back to that little moment where Spud shakes his head, was that something discovered on set, or just because obviously in the draft he doesn't shake his head?
Yeah, I think that was on set. Yeah, I think or in discussion beforehand. I think with the two Ewans and Danny, and they decided that was the way to play it, which I think is fair enough.
Because there's something similar to, I remember listening to the commentary on one of the special DVD versions years ago, the scene where Tommy and Mark Renton are passing, and then in the script it's a moment happens between them.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, like, well, you didn't know what that moment was, just
Yeah,
left it
yeah.
up to the
That's
actor.
what I say. And actors, and leave it up to the actors. They'll find a way. Yeah. I mean, the other thing, of course, is that I don't know if Spud, you kind of in the book, in Irvin's book, it's character Spud, but Ewan Bremner's portrayal is very sympathetic, and people like Spud. And I mean, just in practical sense, a bit of a downer if Spud comes out of the story with nothing, you know.
So picking up on that, I mean, you're going into the ending with that uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, what was the kind of certainty that you were aiming for? Or do you find that when you write, it's okay to aim for an ending you're not quite sure of yet?
I think in a work like this, yeah, a bit of sort of openness towards an ending is sort of inevitable. It's not a thriller or a heist movie or anything like that. It's a character study, a scene, a slice of life, whatever you like to call it. And the ending is kind of up for grabs, I think, you know, in the writing process and in the production. Yeah.
Do you think you could get away with that open-endedness today?
Could you? I don't know. If you're making a film, a low budget film, yeah, you know, on a sort of material like this, yes, I hope so. Yeah.
So I want to see if anyone has any final questions for John in a moment. Actually, I'll take one now. Actually.
So, could you talk about the process of you kind of like you've done the ending here, and then you find yourself working on T2 all these years later? Had you kind of like, as you put Trainspotting away in a box, or had you been kind of like obsessed with it in all the years between?
No.
What was it like
in
terms of thinking?
Yeah, no. So around the time it came out, I saw it a lot of times. I went to a lot of screenings, and I was very familiar with it. And then I didn't watch it for about more than 20 years, so which is nice. And then came back and watched it in the cinema and really enjoyed it. And we ended up in this, deciding we'd like to follow the characters and rejoin them. And it was a really nice experience to write that. It was the most enjoyable experience of writing a script I've had, actually, because the voices of the actors portraying these characters were so strong that it took me quite a long time to figure out what a story might be. And at that point, I was very glad that we'd left the money in the locker for Spud, because it made it all possible. But once I'd sort of roughly decided what the story was, honestly, the characters were in my head talking. Those voices, the actors, like Robert Carlyle. I didn't have to think, what does Begbie say now? Robert Carlyle was in my head telling me what to write. Don't fuck around here, John, you know. But the same for all of them. You know, there's such strong performances, of Kelly MacDonald and Ewan Bremner and John Lee Miller and everyone involved. So it was a real pleasure. I felt I was just being reacquainted with these people. It was really nice.
So yeah, just before we see if anyone has any final further questions, one thing I really noticed actually about all these three scenes that we've looked at today is how well set up they were by the scenes that came before them, which I think is equated throughout the script. Even though the book is very sprawling, I think the script is very tightly structured, with one scene leading very effectively to the next and informing the next. I mean, in that toilet scene, in the scenes before, we see that Renton desperately needs he needs the heroin to get through the night, and he can only find these suppositories. So then we understand how desperate he is to get them back when he loses them in the toilet. And in that middle scene, we see the judge has already told him if he's going to be put in prison if he doesn't complete the rehab program, and then therefore it's very compelling when you see him taking heroin again and overdosing. And in this scene, I think maybe going a bit to what you were saying there, Sean, about how more likeable Renton seems. I think some of that is also because the previous scene, you see the way that Begbie is acting and behaves and treats him really, really badly, and then you're kind of very much on his side and wanting him to take the money here. So I wanted to ask, what point in your writing process are you thinking about how can all these scenes knit together? How can one scene inform the next? And do you sort of reverse engineer things at all, where you go, okay, he's going to take the money here, therefore I've got to go back and I've got to have a scene that's going to motivate that?
I'm sure there's a bit of that, but I think that idea of how do you knit it together, you got to you're thinking about that pretty early. As I was saying, it's a practical thing. You've got the book and the scenes and what do I respond to emotionally, what do I like, what do I want to see, and so on. But then, as I say, you've got to be trying to shape them into some form of coherence, move things back and forth until it feels right. And another thing we haven't touched on, of course, it's all stitched together with voiceover, which was a decision to do it. And it was a decision because there's this inner monologue in the book, and it's a very strong voice, in terms of point of view and in terms of turn of phrase and so on. And we wanted to find a way to broadcast that, and voiceover seemed right. And voiceover was an interesting experience. I don't think I've done one since, because it ties you into certain things that can be inhibiting, where you've got plot. But I think in a situation like this, where the plot's pretty tenuous, it's quite effective. And if you've got good source material to draw on, it can work really well. And you did it so well. And I think but the interesting thing that struck me in voiceover, and you tell me if this is wrong, or anyone can tell me, please, if this is wrong. But I was thinking of two kind of great voiceovers in kind of modern movie, Apocalypse Now and in Goodfellas. And in both of these, there's a cheat. If you look at the opening line of the voiceover in Apocalypse Now, it says, "Shit, I was still in Saigon." Okay, so when's that voiceover happening? It's a cheat, isn't it? Shit, I am still, surely. Or I was, when's he telling the story? And that is but as a viewer, it's fine, it works, doesn't it? And and it's the same, we've done the same thing here. It's both past and present at the same time.
There's a timeless aspect to it. But I mean, you don't notice it because it fits.
Yeah, you know it when it works, and it jars if it doesn't. But that you look at them all, and that trick is there. So that's worth bearing in mind if you're planning a voiceover.
I loved going to the voiceover on the page. How again, just that trust in that the visuals would be filled. Mm-hmm. Like when he's talking about the things he needs for his own detox and rehab. You don't list them visually on the page at the same time with the voiceover. It's just in there. Yeah. And, very often, in teaching, we might say, like, we want to see more than hear, but it worked. And we know that we can see it and hear it at the same time.
Yeah, I hope so, yeah. I mean, again, it's like trusting people to...
No, exactly, trusting people to do their job, yeah.
I think there was a question over there, yeah.
Yeah, kind of linked to that. I wondered about Keith Allen and his role in Shallow Grave, and then because it flips it on its head. And when I've taught both of your films, and so we have a long debate usually about how does Keith Allen turn up as the ending to the beginning of Shallow Grave when it's the end of Trainspotting. What that might mean. And I wondered.
Yeah, so Keith Allen plays the drug dealer who buys the drugs in London and pays the money which Renton then steals. And then, of course, in Shallow Grave, he turns up with a bag of money and then dies in the flat. And a character who looks very like Renton.
His long-lost twin brother from Fargo.
Yeah. Or else, that's definitely what we had in mind when we made Shallow Grave, that it would be necessary to make a prequel immediately afterwards. And we cunningly...
You asked Irvin Welsh to write the book that you could have the prequel based on. Yeah.
I think there's a question there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you make it sound so simple, how you wrote it, and it's like, seems such a masterpiece and flows so perfectly. But I presume there's like loads of just hard, not always nice graft as well that goes into making.
I can't complain. I spend my day at home and I do what I like. So it's not a masterpiece, it's an accident. That's the truth of most of these things. But I come back to what I said at the start, that I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think that it's very hard to get a script into production. Really, really hard. The odds are for everyone, practically everyone, are really low, aren't they? But even if you're writing your first script, getting someone to read it is even more difficult. And there are so many it's sort of people think, oh, I've got to try and write something that they'll like. I think really just try and if you're interested in writing, just write what you like. Of course, if what you like is, if it's not, if it doesn't chime with other people like, then that's the way it goes. But most people, we like stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not necessarily in that order, of course. We like characters that we can enjoy being with and so on. So, you like these things, which you probably do, but write the one you like, because it'll stand out more. It'll be more individual. That's what I preach. So that's why I say it was always good not knowing what I was doing. And then afterwards, later on, I got more, started working for students, you got all these notes and stuff. I started trying to write more what I thought people wanted to see, which I think was a mistake. But now I feel, I'll just do it. And because in the end, your script probably won't get made anyway. My script, so at least I'll have a document I like, and then sometimes, and people do respond to it, if it's individual, because it's come from you, it's the right thing. That's my.
So just adding into that, like when you're writing it now, and it's for yourself, how do you know when you're like, I'm done? Like I've done all I can do on the page?
Well, it's funny that, isn't it? I think you reach a point where you think, I really like this, and then you put it down for a few weeks or months even, and then someone makes comments, you come back and you think, yeah, I should change that. So in a sense, it's never done. But then there's also, and who knows, you can only tell in retrospect, there's also a kind of point where if you meddle with it further, you start making it worse, which is the curse of studio filmmaking. Yeah. Can you just do another rewrite? And then the writer's bored, and it just doesn't work. You just start chipping away at what was wonderful until you're left with a generic piece. So. But who knows where that point is? You don't really know until afterwards.
So just before we all go to lunch, I just wanted to ask, firstly, Sean, having read the script and watched the film, I think probably more than once, I would imagine. Was there anything that you then kind of applied, that you learned from reading the script, that you applied to your own work after that?
Well, as I said, I watched this a very long time ago, and I remember, books, I'm from South Africa, and books in South Africa were very expensive, and so I remember going to our local bookstore, because they'd published your script at that point, and I remember, and we used to go into town once a week, and so I would go to the bookstore and I'd read the script on the shelves sneakily, and that was one of the first scripts I ever read. And so I guess a huge part of what started me on the journey of screenwriting was your script. So it's a big thanks for that. But like I said, the thing I take now as a screenwriter with experience in writing is that confidence, that trust in other people. And it's an aim that I don't quite reach, but it's something I remind myself with my latest current scripts to go back to that trust. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't buy the script, because that would have been a waste of money. Because Irvin was always very proud that his novel Trainspotting was the most stolen book in Britain, because he felt it must be reaching out to people who don't normally read books, and he was probably right. So,
I think it was a Channel 4 publication of your book, of your script. But yeah, so for me, and also. Right from the start, I think your use of connecting the connective tissue between scenes was a huge influence on my writing, and I've always loved finding ways to connect scenes cinematically.
And John, finally, I just wanted to ask you, after you'd written the Trainspotting screenplay, was there anything you learned from doing so that you then applied to your scripts that you wrote after that?
Only to come back to what I said before, which was years later, I realised that I should let my mind be a bit freer again. That's what I enjoy.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming along today. Please say a big thank you to John. And also, can we say a big thank you to Sean for joining us today? And and thank you so much to everyone, so many of you who came along today, and for all your questions. Thank you so much. You can sign up to Script Club, and you can see our upcoming events. We're going to be at some more festivals. We're also going to be doing some more online discussions next year. So you can sign up, go to centreframe.club/scriptclub, or you can just scan the QR code thing there. So I hope very much you'll join us for one of our future discussions. Until then, thank you very much.